I'm Callista.
And I'm Teresa, and this is Terrifyingly Typical True Crime. And I think today, since Christmas is so close, that we were going to talk about holiday movies.
Yeah, I think so.
I think I know which holiday movies that you enjoy and which ones you don't, but do tell, I could be wrong.
Well, I think we both have the same favorite, Love Actually, right?
Yeah, and I know I've looked as I need to be careful. I tend to go down rabbit holes, but I know there were things that were inappropriate, like how young Keira Knightley is. She's only 18, and Andrew Lincoln is, God, I don't know. I don't remember now, quite a bit older. And I get that, but I'm just looking at it as we love everything British, but there's so many good actors. And yes, it has questionable, a few questionable things, but yeah, I like it, and I feel like Hugh is, like, at his prime in that.
Oh, definitely. And who doesn't love the dancing scene?
I mean, I was looking at something the other day, and that came up, and, I'm doing something else, but of course, I must stop, and I must watch that because yeah. Yeah, and I saw I think the other day that it's the 20th anniversary time just keeps on flying of, The Family Stone, and I
Ah,
like that one too.
I do too, yeah.
Again, a lot of, good actors, and yeah, I like that one. And I know a couple years ago, we watched The Holiday because I thought I remembered that being better, and I know a lot of people love that, and of course, I love Kate Winslet and Jude Law and Jack Black and Cameron Diaz. I mean, I like Kate Winslet and Jude Law more, but it was a little, what's the word, hokey?
Hokey, veering a little tropey.
Yeah, I remembered it being better. So, I mean, it's got a cute premise, the whole house swap thing, and yeah, yeah. And then I know lots of people like, Elf, and I know, that is not your thing, and I think I saw that once. It's not my fave either, but, I mean, I know there's a whole bunch, and there should be a whole bunch for to each your own, right?
Yes, yeah. I know people really like also, I think Home Alone and The Grinch, and I never really liked Home Alone. The Grinch is fine. But yeah, each to each your own. If you whatever you like, you do you. You watch it to your heart's content.
That's funny. I kind of think it's been so long since I've seen Home Alone. I mean, I think it was definitely like time and place kind of thing. It was fine for the times. Macaulay Culkin is kind of adorable. Parents are, how do you leave your kid? I don't care if you have 30 of them. But anyway, um, but the Grinch, I don't love actors being dressed up like characters, the whole, you know what I mean? Like he's the Grinch. I don't know. I think you kind of like the premise of that, like, he's off by himself with his dog, but I don't know, maybe it's that I'm not a huge Jim Carrey fan or that I don't know, I think it's that he's not that they were gonna make him look like the Grinch without him wearing, like, some kinda costume, but I don't know, I just not my thing.
Yeah, I hear that. Maybe we would have liked I think the cartoon version with I think Benedict Cumberbatch he voiced. Maybe we would have liked that better.
Really? Okay. Yeah, maybe, and of course, I mean, it's been years since I watched this, but I really kind of loved all the like Rudolph and Frosty. I actually liked Rudolph better. But anyways, just kind of the songs and just like I kind of tend to like the traditional Christmas stuff. So not the over the top campy stuff, but
Yeah, me too. And I think maybe the Santa Claus with Tim Curry. I want to say Tim Allen.
yeah, you're right. The first one was super cute. The third one was really lame. And I think the second one was okay. It's kind of like they get, like we struck gold on the first of something, so we must continue. No, let's quit while we're ahead. Yeah, the first one was kind of cute. Yeah. Yeah. And I know you don't remember, but when you were really little, you liked this one. I swear it was called Annabelle. Was like, I don't know, was like this cow pretending to be like a reindeer or something that had like a little bell and like Annabelle is saved. I know you don't remember. But anyways, you liked that. So
I really don't remember that. I'm not surprised. I like the animal one though.
of course, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember I think we saw it in theaters for I think dad was having some work event. I never liked the Polar Express. For some reason I got creepy vibes from that.
Oh, I kind of liked that. Yeah, I forgot about that. And I think I always wanted us to actually, like, do, like, the whole, different places have the whole Polar Express thing. I think it was somewhere in northern Arizona or something. Maybe you didn't like because it's that weird not Pixar, but, like, the weird, animation kind of thing, but doesn't Tom Hanks narrate that?
Yes, that's true, I do like Tom Hanks.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever I haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life since, like, you know, I don't know, 30 plus years. I don't know that you've ever seen that.
I'm not sure I have. I know we saw, a performance of Miracle on 34th Street, which was good.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We saw the movie too with, Elizabeth Perkins and I can't remember his name, Dylan. No, it's not Dylan McDermott. I don't know. Anyways, I think we liked that. Yeah, some of them we only see once or twice and I forget about them, but
Yeah, I'm sure we did. I guess the play, sticks out. It makes me think of Sing the Nutcracker.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. Anywho,
So, like with our Halloween episode, since it's the festive season and since Christmas is only a few days away, we thought we'd cover two cases that happened on Christmas Eve. Even though the idealized version at the holidays we're all after is filled with joy, magic, and nostalgia, the desire to create the perfect Christmas with limited finances only adds to the special kind of stress extended family time brings. And the expectation that this time of year is about cherishing time with our loved ones means that those in abusive relationships feel even more pressure to maintain appearances, all while they're at even greater risk. Not only are their abusers off from work and thus omnipresent, but many support services also reduce their hours and staff, further lengthening the list of obstacles to seeking help. Considering all this, it's no wonder that December generally sees a 20% rise in police interventions for situations involving domestic violence.
so not the most wonderful time of the year.
Horrible humans gotta try to ruin everything. But before we get into the first of two abusive relationships that turn deadly, we have to note that although the perpetrator confessed, he was never convicted for obvious reasons we'll talk about later on. But because of that, we have to say that this is the alleged story of events.
By December 24th, 2014, 36-year-old Dustin Lee Klopp and 34-year-old Stephanie Kilhefner Klopp had been renting the home at 623 Georgetown Road in Paradise Township, Pennsylvania, for nearly a year. A long gravel lane led up to the isolated house sitting on top of a hill. In fact, the nearest home was over 100 yards away, but a portion of the Klopp's driveway was shared with Tim and Sheila Roher. As it was Christmas Eve, the Rohers were hosting their extended family. When Sheila's parents were leaving around 7:30 that evening, Tim and Sheila saw Stephanie's car coming up the driveway. Despite their relative proximity, like many of their neighbors, the Rohers weren't close with either Dustin or Stephanie. Dustin's paranoia, such as when he instructed Tim to tell him if he saw anyone loitering near the property or bothering their animals, hadn't endeared him to any of the neighbors, or even to the FedEx driver, whom Dustin had cursed at when he was making his rounds. It seemed that Dustin didn't want anyone getting too close to his house because when a package was mistakenly dropped off at the Rohers instead of the Klopps, Tim drove to his neighbor's home to deliver it himself, only to discover a cable with a no trespassing sign blocking the driveway. Although he felt justified in removing it to give the Klopps their package, there was no doubt that its owner had no desire for Tim to drop by again.
As unfriendly as her husband was, that Christmas Eve evening, Stephanie stuck to her habit of saying hello and wished Tim and Sheila a Merry Christmas before walking into her home. The rowers would later realize that this brief, ordinary encounter made them some of the last people to see Stephanie alive. Because not even 3 hours later, during a late night argument around 10 p.m., Dustin punched his wife of 3 years in the face so hard that she crumpled unconscious to the floor of their home. Once she was no longer in a position to defend herself, he used a knife to slit her throat. Almost unbelievably, Stephanie was still alive. So, Dustin repeatedly hit her in the head with an axe to finish the job.
My God, what a monster.
It's just so brutal. Having attempted to clean up the bloody scene, Dustin hid her body inside of a bag that he stored in a shed on the property, leaving behind their two ponies, goat and horse.
And the animals are okay, right?
As far as I could tell, Dustin drove the couple's two children, who were 5 and 2, and thankfully not witnesses to their mother's murder, to his parents' house on Christmas Day for the usual festivities. Once his kids were out of the way, he called the state police around 5:20 p.m. to recount the terrible events of the night before. He then followed through on his promise to turn himself in by having his father drive him to the state police barracks in Lancaster around 6:30. Nearly an hour before her killer walked through the barracks door, a trooper verified Dustin's story when he discovered Stephanie's body stuffed into a car carrier bag in the shed.
Although District Attorney Craig Stedman had known killers to readily confess in an attempt to argue self defense, Dustin's call was particularly odd because he had waited almost 24 hours before reporting a crime the police weren't even aware had taken place. Dustin's confession may have been unexpected, but tragically, his wife's murder was anything but. In 2018, reporters from the Washington Post found that in the last 10 years, out of over 4,400 women who were murdered, 46% were killed by their partners. When those reporters combed through data from 47 major U.S. cities, they established that over a third of the men who had killed their partners in 5 of those cities were known threats, meaning that they had had a violent criminal history or had had a restraining order taken out against them.
Like these murderous men, Dustin had more than a few black marks in his past. Way back in 1997, he had pled guilty to simple assault and burglary, and 4 years later, he had again entered a guilty plea to burglary and resisting arrest. Then, in 2007, Dustin pled guilty to two DUI charges. But most telling of all, in 2008, Stephanie went to take out a protection from abuse order against Dustin while the couple were living in an apartment in Akron Borough, Pennsylvania. When she asked for the order on October 2nd, 2008, she recounted an incident on September 19th in which Dustin had punched her in the face, head, and eye. After she had collapsed onto the ground, he had continued his assault by kicking her and dragging her across the pavement. Then, on the night before she saw protection, Dustin had throttled her. Deciding more physical abuse wasn't enough, he had threatened to hunt her down and kill her, ruthlessly detailing how he would blow her head off.
Jesus.
He's so fucking awful. And this was far from the first time Dustin had left Stephanie gasping for air and fighting for her life. He had previously choked her, hit her, slammed her into walls, and knocked her unconscious. Given the ample evidence against him, Dustin was served a temporary order barring him from entering their apartment while he stewed in a cell at Lancaster County Prison. However, 13 days later, on October 15th, Stephanie changed her mind and decided not to pursue a permanent protection order.
Whether through more violence, threats, or manipulation, Dustin had managed to worm his way back in. And less than a year later, Stephanie gave birth to their daughter in August 2009 at Ephrata Community Hospital. Piling onto the stress Stephanie was already contending with while raising a newborn, Dustin was arrested on drug charges the next month. But after pleading guilty, he was given the minimum term of 2 years in prison and was released in September 2011. The couple got married shortly after Dustin regained his freedom on October 1st, 2011, and they welcomed their second child the following year. Barely 2 years later, Dustin confessed to killing the mother of his two children. He was charged in Lancaster County with criminal homicide, abuse of a corpse, and evidence tampering. Following his arraignment on December 26, 2014, he was denied bail and sent to await trial at Lancaster County Prison. Showing how well defense attorneys know their clients, Corey Miller, who had previously represented Dustin for the drug charges, said his old client had never seemed violent. I mean, was Mr. Miller unaware of the assault, resisting arrest, and filing a protection of abuse order?
If I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, which I'm loath to do, maybe he was so focused on the charges he was trying to get Dustin off that he forgot about all the others in the intervening years. If I'm not, maybe he was just trying to find something to say to insert himself into the case.
I mean, I guess everybody deserves representation, but it seems like you it seems like you would want to know what your client has done in the past, but maybe not. Maybe it's better to feign that you don't, so you're not outwardly lying. Who knows?
Who knows?
Neither he nor Stephanie appeared to be the type to get into an argument that was so heated it turned physical.
Stephanie's autopsy provided more proof that Corey Miller had gravely underestimated his client's cruelty. In light of the finding that she had been sexually assaulted either before or after her death, a felony sex charge was filed against Dustin, in addition to the three earlier charges. After speaking with his lawyers, Dustin waived his right to a preliminary hearing on all charges on February 18th, 2015. While that wasn't an admission of guilt, it was an acknowledgement of the overwhelming evidence the state had. Following District Judge Isaac Stoltzfus's ruling, the prosecution got ready to present their case in Lancaster County Court. But before the trial could begin, around 7:25 in the evening of February 25th, 2015, medical professionals raced to the side of 36-year-old Dustin Lee Klopp after he was found to have hung himself in his county prison cell. In the 30-minute span between staff checks, he had used the period when his cellmate was at an evening activity to tie a sheet around his neck. Following the prison staff's resuscitation attempts, an ambulance transported Dustin to Lancaster General Hospital, but 2 days later, he was declared brain dead and taken off life support. Lancaster County Coroner Dr. Stephen Diamantoni ruled the death a suicide due to lack of oxygen from passive hanging, and no autopsy was performed.
An investigation was launched into Dustin's suicide, as it should have been. But jailhouse suicides aren't uncommon. In fact, local jails have a far higher suicide rate than either state or federal prisons. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the average suicide rate for federal prisons between 2015 and 2019 was 16 per 100,000 prisoners. During the same time period, state prisons had an average annual suicide rate of 21 per 100,000. By contrast, the suicide rate in local jails was 49 per 100,000 in 2019, with a spike in 2015, the year Dustin took his own life, of 52 per 100,000. Numerous factors contribute to this discrepancy, but three significant ones are the shock of confinement, which is when first time inmates see their world shrink to the size of their holding cell. The reality that state and federal facilities have more information on their prisoners' mental health following their conviction, and that the absence of a cellmate for inmates in single cells leaves them with more opportunity to take their own life without anyone noticing in time. Ultimately, the investigation into Dustin's suicide concluded that the prison staff hadn't been negligent or involved. As the security camera outside the cell captured, no one had gone into the cell during the 30-minute span Dustin had killed himself, so no disciplinary action was taken.
On another investigative front, District Attorney Craig Stedman said that they had been gathering background information on Stephanie and Dustin's relationship in the lead up to the trial. We can't know if Stephanie was referencing Dustin's abusive behavior in a Facebook post she made in October 2014, in which she spoke of the permanent damage bullying causes, but we can make an educated guess that her husband's violence was never far from her mind. Dustin had a long history of abuse, and the repeated chokings were particularly concerning, as an abuser who attempts to strangle their partner is much more likely to go on to murder them. But even if Stephanie had obtained a permanent protection order, which is more specific than a restraining order because it is issued for victims of abuse, stalking, sexual assault, and domestic violence, it could have triggered Dustin to kill her earlier. We all know that it's not as simple as just leaving. In fact, 75% of domestic violence related homicides happen after the victim leaves. For a minimum of 2 years after the survivor takes a leap of faith and walks away from the relationship, there is a 75% increase of violence as the abuser attempts to regain control.
Speaking of classic abusive behavior, what neighbor Tim Roher took for paranoia could have been Dustin's attempt to keep Stephanie isolated from possible concerned witnesses to the abuse he dished out behind closed doors. And while we have no evidence that Dustin ever abused their two children, there's no question that they were also his victims. Their father murdered their mother before killing himself, and he chose Christmas Eve as the onset of a sad series of events that ended with them as orphans. Instead of flowers, a memorial fund was set up in their mother's name, with all donations going to them. And now, on to another nightmare story of domestic abuse. Miles from the happiest place on earth in Anaheim, California, what began as a holiday celebration would end in death for 26-year-old mother of three, Za'Zell Preston. Za'Zell and her husband of less than 2 months, William Wallace, returned to the home they shared with their 7-week-old son, Marcel Mari, and her daughters from a previous relationship, 3-year-old Elise Noriel and 8-year-old Sayana Niall, from a neighbor's Christmas party on the evening of December 24th, 2011. Zazelle was hopeful that because this was Christmas Eve and her and William had had a good time at the party, that William's good mood would continue. Unfortunately, Zazelle would be deadly wrong. William was an abusive prick. He had abused Zazelle for the entirety of their relationship. This evening would be no different, except this time she wouldn't survive his abuse. As soon as the couple were back in their apartment, the arguing that had begun on their walk home escalated. William started yelling at Zazelle, calling her names, and in his words, tossing her around a bit. Zazelle ran from the apartment, but William ran after her, picking her up and carrying her back into their home. William pushed Zazelle, and she fell into the glass coffee table. Sayana came out of her room and heartbreakingly tried to pick the larger pieces of glass from her mom's body. William yelled at her to leave it, picked Zazelle up, and carried her to the bathroom, where he slammed her head into the toilet bowl, killing her. Sayana followed her mom and William into the bathroom, but William told her to go to bed, that he would take care of her mom. William then maneuvered Zazelle's limp body to their bed and crawled in beside her, his dead wife, that he had just murdered.
The next morning, William brought their infant son into the bedroom and tried to have him breastfeed. But because his mother was fucking dead, that didn't work, and he had to give him a bottle. William then dragged Zazelle into the main room and sat her on the couch, placing a pair of sunglasses on her face. When the girls got up, he charmingly told them that their mom got drunk and ruined Christmas. The girls noticed something was wrong when their mother didn't talk to them and simply sat still, unmoving on the couch. William, apparently assuming this would be a memory worth cherishing, recorded the girls opening their gifts. However, William soon realized he couldn't hide Zazelle's death, and at the girls' continued questions about what was wrong with their mom, finally called 911 around 9:30 a.m. William told the dispatcher that his wife needed medical assistance. When the dispatcher asked him if he could start CPR, he hung up. EMTs arrived quickly and found Za'Zell slumped on the couch. It was obvious that she was deceased. Her body was cold, stiff, and she had no pulse. EMTs immediately noticed the violence that had obviously occurred in the apartment. There were holes punched in the walls, the bathroom door was hanging off its hinges, the glass table was shattered, and there were drops of blood throughout the house. William told the EMTs that his wife had been drinking and fell into the table. Luckily, the EMTs didn't believe this colossal story of bullshit and called the police. William was arrested and Za'Zell was transported to the hospital where she was pronounced dead. Thankfully, Za'Zell Preston, Za'Zell's mother, became guardian of her three grandchildren. Za'Zell had known her relationship with William was toxic. While holiday shopping with her mom a few days before her death, she told her she wanted to leave the relationship. She wanted to focus on her kids and on school. Za'Zell was looking forward to 2012. She was set to graduate from Cypress College, where she was studying administration of justice and hoped to become a domestic violence counselor. Maybe this was a way for Za'Zell to help others in the same situation she was in. Unfortunately, she knew all too well what it was like to be stuck in an abusive relationship while desperately wanting to leave it. Her lived experience would certainly have helped those in similar relationships.
William had served 45 days behind bars in 2008 after being convicted of battery against Za'Zell. After this minuscule sentence, he was required to attend a treatment program, which was perfunctory at best.
I'm guessing it wasn't much longer or more effective than the pathetic jail sentence.
Too true. Soon after his release, Za'Zell got a restraining order, but of course, William violated the order and was sent back to prison. After William was released from his second stint in prison, he told Za'Zell he had changed. He had, wait for it, found Jesus and wanted to be a better person.
Because his lack of religious devotion was the only reason he was a piece of shit before.
Yeah, so true. Za'Zell, hoping this was true, decided to give him another chance, and William moved into the apartment Za'Zell shared with her two young daughters. Za'Zell found out she was pregnant in early 2011, and ever hopeful, in July, she posted a picture of her and William kissing on Facebook with the caption, "Lovebirds for life."
And it's not like women in abusive relationships are the only ones who believe having a baby will make everything better.
Here, here. William was jailed on December 25th, 2011, where he remained until his 2021 trial. His bail was set for $1 million, but he was unable to post bond. This is undeniably an exorbitant amount of time from arrest to trial. William was indicted by a grand jury in April 2012, and his trial was originally scheduled for April 2013. However, his attorney at the time convinced the judge that the grand jury did not have all of the evidence, so the case was dismissed and the district attorney's office had to refile and start over. The prosecutor decided rather than going the grand jury route again, she would request a preliminary hearing to show there was enough probable cause to move the case forward. There were additional delays in gathering evidence, specifically witness testimony, as so much time had lapsed from the date of the murder to the eventual trial. Unfortunately, we couldn't find any more information regarding the really lengthy delay. Williams' trial began on March 8th, 2021. In a weird coincidence, both the prosecutor and defense attorney share the same first name. So we will be referring to them as Good and Bad Heather. Not really, though it does seem apt.
It really does. Prosecutor Heather Brown said that on the evening of December 24th, 2011, William did what he often did. He beat his wife, and he expected that, as she had in the past, she would survive. For her part, defense attorney Heather Moorhead said that William was accused of something he didn't do. And though it was tragic, Za'Zell died because of her own actions. William was innocent. Attorney Moorhead said that Za'Zell had been drinking and had accidentally fallen into the glass table. In fact, she was so drunk and apparently so clumsy, she fell numerous times that evening, hitting her head on a wall and then on the toilet while William was trying to help her. While weaving her fantastical story, Attorney Moorhead did acknowledge that the relationship hadn't been perfect and that there was yelling and arguing, but there was also a lot of love. Zazell's mother testified that William was violent and abusive and had threatened to kill her daughter numerous times. Zazell's grandmother, and kudos to her because she was 90 at the time of the trial, testified that Za'Zell had once called her from a grocery store bathroom where she was hiding to escape William's wrath. And after one horrific beating, she found her pregnant granddaughter curled into a fetal position on the street in front of their apartment. One of the EMTs described the scene at the apartment as looking like a scene from The Shining. Attorney Brown said that William would use any rationale to beat Za'Zell. He was controlling and insecure, a lethal combination, and would beat her if she was gone for too long running errands. Attorney Brown speculated that William had become aware of Zazell's plans to leave and, feeling his control slipping away, confronted her on Christmas Eve.
Attorney Moorhead said that neighbors heard Zazell yelling at William, I'm sure, while he was sitting calmly with his hands clasped in his lap, listening.
Oh, no doubt.
She also felt the need to point out that then 8-year-old Ziana had told the police that her mother tripped and fell into the glass table. She further tried to paint William as heroic, stating he had carried his drunk, hurt wife into the bathroom, but she accidentally hit something in the bathroom before he placed her in the bathtub, where he began removing glass from her body. William said that Zazelle must have suffered a concussion in the bathroom and he thought she would just sleep it off. Anyone that has had or known someone that has had a concussion would know that that isn't correct. Right, Callista?
I mean, it sure sounds like William was saying it was fine to just ignore it and forget personal experience. Anyone who's watched a TV show in which someone has taken a serious blow to the head knows that's not correct.
In fact, William only knew something was wrong when he couldn't get her to wake up the next morning. Attorney Brown clearly pointed out that Ziana was 8 years old when she saw William push her mom into that coffee table. Ziana lived in that abusive house, and though William had not been abusive towards her or her siblings, she was scared. She knew her mom was badly hurt, and the only adult in the house told her what to say to the police. She had no way of knowing that William would go to jail and stay there. When William told her what to say to the police, she did as she was told.
Of course she did. The idea that as a child she had any other option is ridiculous. The most harrowing part of the trial was when Ziana, then 17, testified about the night her mother was murdered. She testified that her mom and William were arguing when they came home from the party, and things turned physical as they often did. She told the court that William pushed her mom into the glass table. She remembered that when William brought Za'Zell to the bathroom, he dropped her and caused her to hit her head. She said her mom's head was bleeding and she didn't respond when she tried to talk to her. William carried Za'Zell to their bedroom and told Ziana to go to bed. The next morning, Za'Zell was propped up on the couch, and William told Ziana and her sister that their mom was drunk and had ruined Christmas. Ziana touched her mom's arm, but it was hard and cold. She said, Mommy, Mommy, but as we know, Za'Zell had been dead for hours at this point. William then told the girls to open their presents. When cross-examining Ziana, Attorney Moorhead again tried to home in on the discrepancy in her story, seemingly oblivious to the difference between a scared 8-year-old saying her mom fell and a 17-year-old who had spent the last 9 years with her maternal grandparents and who no longer lived in fear of William telling the truth. Now tasked with weighing up all the evidence, jurors had to choose from several charges, including involuntary manslaughter and first degree murder. Eventually, they decided on second degree murder. In Zionna's victim impact statement, she said that her life had been hell since William murdered her mom. She said that her childhood ended that night, and at times, it felt like her life wasn't worth living. She told William that she would never forgive him and that the loss of her mom keeps her up at night. Diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder and depression, she told him that her life has been on a downhill spiral since that horrible Christmas Eve.
Seidel, in her victim impact statement, recalled the phone call she had with William that terrible early Christmas morning. He admitted that they had gotten in a fight the night before and he had roughed her up a bit and then imparted the wisdom every abuser must believe. If she could take another breath, she could take another hit. Seidel pleaded with William to put her daughter on the phone, but he just said she wouldn't wake up, that she was drooling and had peed herself. Seidel told the court that he showed her daughter no mercy, and in turn, he should be shown no mercy. Za'Zell's brother, Marchand, who is heavily involved in the lives of his nieces and nephew, told William that he was helping raise his nephew the right way, that he was a smart, witty kid with strong athleticism, but that because of his actions, William will never get to see what his son has become, and that he would protect Za'Zell's kids with his life.
Good on Za'Zell's family. I'm just always impressed when the victims' loved ones continue to pursue justice by testifying about the tragedy they've lived through.
Yeah, that's no easy feat.
No.
Finally, former Anaheim City Councilwoman Lori Galloway, who is the founder of the Eli Home, a shelter for abused children and mothers, was a friend of Za'Zell's and had been trying to help her leave her violent marriage. She said William denied the world of Za'Zell's kind and compassionate nature, which she was hoping to use to help others escape the nightmare situation she was living in.
William is serving out his sentence at the High Desert State Prison in Susanville. In November 2023, he stipulated to his unsuitability for parole for a period of 5 years. Inmates often agree to this to avoid a formal hearing and the likelihood that a parole hearing would result in a denial. Additionally, this allows the inmate to better prepare for their eventual parole hearing by improving their behavior and leaning into their rehabilitation. Williams' next, or really first, parole hearing is scheduled for November 2028. Za'Zell was so young when she was murdered by her abuser. He not only ended her life, but also robbed her children of their mom. We all know that intimate partner violence is often underreported. And if and when it is reported, the abuser feels threatened and often escalates by murdering their partner. The most dangerous time for someone experiencing domestic abuse is when they plan on leaving their volatile situation. Though statistics vary, the consensus is that Black women experience domestic violence at a rate of 35% higher than white women. Consequently, Black women are more likely to die at the hands of their abuser than white women. Ending a thoroughly rage inducing episode, we hope you're able to carve out some holiday cheer for yourself, whatever that entails, from boisterous dinners with family and friends to a quiet evening with a warm drink and a good book. When we come back in the new year, we'll be continuing our series on serial killers who targeted gay men in the 90s with the case of Colin Ireland.
All the sources we used for this episode are in the show notes below. If you'd like to suggest a case or theme for us to discuss, you can email us at terrifyinglytypicalpodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us at Terrifyingly Typical Podcast on Instagram and at Terrifyingly Typical Pod on TikTok. Feel free to leave us a comment, rating, or review to let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your opinions.
See you next time.